How are you finding life in China?
It's been good. It's good. There's lots of things about it. Like there's the challenge part to it. So I like it in general, man. It's good. I like the people about it. I like the challenge part. There's lots of things that are good. There's also this stuff that's difficult. So it's easy to go to the challenging parts. But there's lots of things that's convenient. The people are super friendly. People are.
Do you have to say that because you're being listened to, or?
Well, there's that too. No, no. I mean, there's definitely the challenge. Like both are true. It's the same as what you and I can always talk about. Like it's like, there's things here that are challenging, right? The language for me sucks. I'm not very smart with language, so that makes it super difficult at times where you're just like, oh God, fucking struggle. But there's also the things like people are genuinely. They're very. They want to help you. They want to interact with you. You almost have a little bit of foreigner privilege here in the fact that people are grateful that you're here. And in my industry, mate, in the elite sports industry, that can sometimes be they're usually there being like, oh, you're lucky to be helping me. So you get the egos about that. So there's that.
What do you notice the main difference between? I guess I've just got a massive fly that's just come into the shot.
Smashed out, mate.
I hope that was caught on camera.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Totally caught that fly.
Killing it, man. Just talk about Daniel LaRusso. Just, I'm just, that's definitely in the shot, man. So,
just Miyagi that.
Even if it's not, I want to see you Photoshop that shit in where you just like, chopsticks.
No, I definitely a chopstick to you hard. What do you notice about like, What being so? How long have you been in China now?
Here it's been long. I think we've been like 8 years, so it's longer than I've ever anticipated. But COVID took 4 of that.
Yeah, so you know enough. Yeah, you know enough about it to say, well, when you first left Australia for China, and what did you think it was going to be like versus what it actually is like? Tell us about some of the things you've noticed and the differences.
I mean, I had only planned to be here for 4 months, right? I was just coming in to help out, fill in a contract, help them out for a little bit. But I think there's a massive difference in the perception of what China is compared to what it is. We've got, I think as you and I have talked about before, the perception and the mainstream media of what is going on over here is just not. It's not that. They keep talking about how authoritarian, and of course there is that. They have that. There is part of the. If you're going to choose a government, but people are genuinely living just a good free life for the most of it. People are around living a good life. Of course that.
Do you find it's more conservative and like? Do you find that people are more traditional? Then do you still have? I guess alternatives and
for sure, there's still
LGBTQ and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, there is definitely. It's probably not as well, but it's definitely there, right? Yeah, sure, you can say that. It's different families. It's more conservative, and I don't think they allow marriage, and it's not highly promoted. But heaps of people are gay. It's just well acknowledged. In fact, I think you see more guys, particularly over here, holding hands and getting on a lot more liberal in some senses.
Right. A lot of people wouldn't have thought that.
Yeah. I think it feels like, from when I go back home, it feels like this is just such a oppressive place to be at, and it doesn't feel like that on the ground. I think, as I've said to you before, I feel more controlled and more restricted when I'm back in Australia. It just it feels that. Now, of course, they have, and maybe I'm trying to just offset what I think is a very strong view on the other side. Maybe I'm just trying to give the different viewpoint that not many people get. Of course, Australia's the best, if you ask me. I wouldn't want to, live anywhere long term. I know I can be here with the freedom to know that I can leave, right? And I'm glad that I've got that, and will still come back to Australia. But it's also not as bad as what it portrayed over there. So I think that needs that balance of it to be able to be like, man, there's lots of things in Australia that we're really restricted on, and you get torn down if it's culturally inappropriate, whatever the cultural thing is going on at the time. Whereas here, sure, you certainly don't talk about politics. You certainly don't bag the head leader. You don't do that.
Party.
Yeah. So that's you're not going there for sure. That's not something you do. But But in general, most people's lives, they're just running around doing their thing. They're focused on themselves, and it seems to work.
So with what you're doing, like just for the people who are listening and haven't, I guess, an idea about your history. So you started off with, I guess we'll talk about your sports journey and your physio journey. And right now you're working for the Chinese national netball team. Is that right?
No, volleyball team, the Shanghai
volleyball.
one.
Sorry, volleyball team, the Shanghai. Yeah. So it's a national comp, and you're the physio, the team physio, right?
Team physio, strength coach. I do a bit of that.
So in breaking it down in sort of, because a lot of the people that I've spoken to also have different ideas about the journey that they, to work in this area of elite sports, obviously you followed a certain path. So just, in sort of bite-sized chunks, tell us how you, from I guess, finishing up school, what was your path to end up working in China as a, the physio for the volleyball team?
I mean, it's been taking a fair few years to get there, and certainly gone in a fair few different avenues. But look, I suppose I've always liked, you and I growing up together, we liked the idea of a bit of a challenge, right? I think we both realised that this is, the good part of life is doing something a little difficult and seeing what that brings out of you, and I think I probably got, I wouldn't say addicted, but I realised that's where the good part of life is, and then that became getting around similar people who were doing hard things or trying to be the best at what they were doing. And I think that's probably why I finished up with elite sports physio, is I liked, probably just personally being able to try to see, okay, can I be the best physio I can be, and then I wanted to be around people who were doing good shit, so, but that, I mean, it took definitely a lot of different paths. I went from doing physio and working hard to get that done, and then try to be the best version of that I could be. And then, we went over to East Timor. We sort of ran a physio contract over in Timor-Leste for the UN and the Defence Force over there, which was sort of similar, because even in defence, people they're more active and they're trying to, be the best of what they can do when they're on deployment.
But just taking a step back, so did you go straight into you studied physio at school, and then you went, at uni. Yeah. So after school, uni, and then you worked at a stock standard sort of physio, and then you sort of skipped through to got a job with the UN in East Timor.
Yeah,
but
true.
How did that just, were you just sort of looking at, looking at jobs, or was it through people that you knew?
Started off just in Brisbane, so I'd studied on the Gold Coast, and then I did, you're right, just a basic physio practice for just about sort of 6 months, but still chose the one that paid the least but had the best opportunity for growth. I think, that something that I heard the other day, you only have two jobs. You either have a job that pays you well or you're learning something from. And if neither of those two are there, you should quit. So early on, I'm just trying to learn as much as I can. So I started at a private practice that had a really good internship. I moved to Darwin, and really just for the adventure. My brother was living up there, and in Darwin I was working for the Defence Force up there, and enjoyed that. Had a really dynamic crew who was really good physios, but doing it in a good, fun way. So a really freaking awesome place to work at. But also too, there was no slacking off. You had to be good, and some of those guys were going to go were going to do their masters in sports physio. And I think I was lucky because they were being pushed, they were trying to be their best. I went and did my masters, my sports masters with them, which I think was at the time the earliest person who'd done their sports masters, because I'd only really been out for like a year and a half. You're supposed to be out for like 5.
Yeah, right.
So that sort of got me skyrocketed a little bit, that I was one of the earliest in my career that had an exercise science degree, a physio degree, and a sports masters, which for a dumb bloke from Frankston who really isn't book smart, was a big achievement.
That's brilliant.
Because
I remember you always had battles with reading and stuff, if I remember. Is that true?
Still do, man.
You managed to get 3 degree. Yeah, you still do.
Yeah. It's
I remember
really,
you saying it. What have you actually got a diagnosis or anything? Or are you just not a great reader, or what? Because I remember you complaining about struggling to read back in the day.
Dude, you're so right, completely. And it's funny, it was like maybe only maybe 5-10 years ago now, my ex-wife's sister was doing a developmental psychology and said, can I just do the assessment on you? You're super interesting. And of course, comes up with the diagnosis of, you're dyslexic. And it's like, well, I sort of knew that. Years ago, I had the chance to do the test and I was like, I don't need that. I know that I'm not good at the reading part, but I also know that I'm.
So you are dyslexic. Yeah. So you actually. I didn't know that. Yeah.
But I wondered at the time, actually, even when I got the diagnosis, I was like, I'm not sure this was useful because it makes you use it as an excuse, right? It's like that didn't stop me doing anything at uni. I just knew that I had to work harder at doing, reading or writing. I just spent more time at the library for some of the reading and writing stuff. But I also know that I can do a presentation heaps easier than anybody else, and I can be in a room and instruct people a lot easier than what other people, that brings them a lot of anxiety. So I just knew that the same as everybody, and I don't know whether the diagnosis, for me personally, I know some people need it for their confidence, but I also see that some people use it as an excuse. It's like, oh cool, I've got dyslexia, I can't do that. Bullshit, man. It just is harder for you.
Do you think that maybe if you found out earlier, it could have changed the way you thought about things? Like if you got diagnosed as a youngster, it may have been something that you used?
Oh, for sure. I still see it now sometimes when I use it. I still see now that I'm like, I've got a book that I've been waiting to write. And I'm but I've got dyslexia. Shut up, idiot. It means you work a little harder at it. Like that's no different than anybody else having to. Some people have to work hard physically, or as I said, in a personal development, in a personal relationship side of it.
Communication, they might struggle. Yeah.
So, but reading sucks, and that is one troubling thing about being in China, man, is learning the language. Honestly, I just had my lesson yesterday, and I just apologised to my teachers, being like, "I'm sorry, man. I know you've taught me this for the 400th time. Can we just laugh about it?"
Yeah.
So,
well, I think that's awesome, man. That you've got 3 degrees. You're you're where you are. We'll talk more about the things that you've done, but you're an overachiever in my books. Like you've done so many awesome things, and I never really knew that you were dyslexic, or that you had any formal diagnosis. I just thought you were just not really a great reader, but to sort of have that, I guess, on there as well, and an example of how the right attitude is still, it doesn't matter. Like you could have had. You could have everything handed to you on a silver platter, high IQ, and still not achieve anything in your life if you don't have the right sort of push and grind,
Yeah, it's completely about that, man. And everyone's got their own challenge of it too, Everybody's a victim in some way, and yet and privileged in another. So they're both true, It's like they're both true. So you can keep saying, I got dyslexia. It's really hard to learn a language, and then also too, you can be like, yeah, man, I'm privileged in almost so many other ways, including having friends like you, growing up where you get to push each other, or you get put in a good environment, or, you have a good loving family, or, all those things, they're both true. Which one you pick to focus on?
Totally.
I can,
Yeah, well, your attitude, it was a great quote from a friend of mine was, your attitude is the difference between an ordeal and an experience, or an ordeal and an adventure. So, yeah.
What?
The difference between an ordeal and an adventure is attitude. And I think that, when you look at that and you think about, I was just thinking as you were saying, you're privileged in some ways and victim in others. And for a lot of people who are successful, they always look at the bad shit that's happened to them, and look at it as some sort of blessing or gift, or, sometimes having a tough upbringing can teach you some toughness, or it can teach you some hunger or some grit, that pays off later in life. Or sometimes, having, plenty of girls out there will say that being beautiful is a bit of a curse at times because people judge them on their appearance rather than, so attitude and how you take these things, is the key, really. Yeah,
they're both true, man. What's that statement of like the 2 brothers who one drinks because his dad was an alcoholic and one doesn't drink because his dad was an alcoholic? It's like, it's it's your
so true.
It's your choice. And what's that? As you sort of say, the mindset. That's the quality of your life. So I think that's if you don't get that shit right, and it's not easy, you got to work on it. But that's the quality of your life. You want to have a shit one, and you also just reminded me of like my dad used to always say. So again, the privilege is certainly not what all the woke thing would like to say, that I'm a white male. It's like, that's not the privilege that I'm talking about. There's so many other different types of privilege that I think helped me much more, like having friends and having a great family. And my father's attitude, he'd always sort of say, mate, when we're in a terrible time, right, it's pissing down rain, you know, the tyres flat, everything's terrible. He's like, this is a great story. You know, he'd always just be like, this is going to be a good story, where you're just like,
this is going to be a good story.
It sucks, man, you know. So
absolutely.
That sort of stuff is lucky.
So let's continue from, so now you're at East Timor working as a physio with Defence.
So I went from because
you were there for a while too.
Yeah, we held that contract for a long time, which was very lucky. You know, I mean, all that stuff. There's so much luck in it, but also too, I made sure I made the calls that made it lucky. You know that. So I was working in the Defence in Darwin, and a friend of ours sort of mentioned that there might have been a contract coming up in East Timor. So I just did the proactive thing and just made a few phone calls, and that finished up being like probably a 7-year contract, I reckon, about that 7-year that we held the contract for the Defence. So I sort of held that, was there, but also got to go and do a lot of stuff with, sports teams like the Australian triathlon team, and in the lead up to some of the Olympics. And so I started to be able to hold that as a base, living in East Timor, and hold the contract there, and then also be able to do some sports physio for different, pre-sessions of, different competitions coming up. So went and worked in a few different, sports. The most one was triathlon, but got to, do a bit of that and hold. So still got experience there whilst holding East Timor, which was a really great experience of just, seeing how people live in third world and developing countries, and again, just makes you grateful for what you've got.
It shapes you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so from there, because I want to get to you working with in Formula One, obviously with Lance.
Yep.
But how did you transition out of that into that?
So,
how do you, once that contract was up in Darwin, then what's the process of getting out, and what was your next steps from there?
So I was in East Timor for that 6 years. We'd and then moved back to, again, I always kept having good little contracts for sports, so anytime there was an elite sports team that needed somebody, I could sort of fit in there. And not forgetting, I was lucky because back then there wasn't too many people that had done the exercise science and the physio, which is like the strength coaching, so the high performance strength coaching, as well as the physiotherapy, as well as the sports masters, especially back 15 years ago. So it was good to have that. And then and that one came up because a friend again just recommended me. Again, you don't have to be good at, you can be dyslexic, man, but you and I both know the way to get ahead is you get along with people. And, and that's how I've never had a job that hasn't been just recommended. So then Lance, we had a interview with the physio who was looking after Lance Stroll, and then within a quick, have an interview for a day. They said, all right, can we fly you out tomorrow to Europe? So they're based in Geneva. And I said, yeah, you can do that. And at the time I went and so met with them in Geneva. His dad, obviously, Lance Stroll, who's the billionaire, and met with him and his son, who at the time was in Formula 3. He was a Ferrari Academy driver. So he was in Formula 3, our Ferrari Academy driver. So met with them. And
so what's it like, man, that whole so I kind of miss it. So how did you actually get this Lance Stroll connection? So where did this was this while you were back after you've done the Darwin thing? Was that the next thing you did?
No. So I was in Darwin. That was only there for a year. Then I went to East Timor for 6 years, and then transitioned.
East Timor,
transitioned back to Melbourne, actually, back to the Mornington Peninsula. I was still working with a bit of defence and holding contracts. And I actually went and worked in the mines for something different. There was a few contracts up in Queensland and doing the pipelines. So I went and worked up there. And it was actually a contact through through an old triathlete. So he was working out at the mines, but he was an ex-triathlete, professional triathlete. And he was good friends with the doctor who was looking after Formula One. So that was the connection of, they said, put this guy forward for an interview. And
they said they were looking for someone to work as an exclusive physio for a young racing driver.
Yeah, well, they actually have, Hinter is one of the companies that looks after a lot of the Formula One drivers, but he was a little different. So I was lucky I got to work a little bit with Hinter, who provides a lot of the physios or, some of the physios or the strength coaches for some of the drivers. But I was quite lucky because he's a different situation because his dad's as wealthy as he is, really. So he
right.
So then I had the connection through that, from just being through a lot of the sports side of things, and the friend who was, actually through the mines, but he was a previous professional triathlete. So then went over there, and that was it's a different world. So then I traveled with them for about 2 months.
What an intimidating thing. So like when you were going to that interview, was it like, this is crazy, I'm looking at becoming after everything you've done, to then just go, look, I'm looking at becoming a physio for just one person and kind of being on call for just one person? Was that strange, or was it not what you were signing up for?
Because a lot of the teams are like that anyway, right? Like, so, in the lead up to the Beijing Olympics, I was working with, the Australian triathlon team. You're really only talking about, you're really focusing on 1 to half a dozen athletes. So it's quite common that's your focus, when you're getting down to the pointy end. So so it wasn't abnormal. I think what works a big time in my favor is I never know who all these people are. So I'm not somebody who's very starstruck. So well,
he wasn't anyone at that time anyway. I guess if you were into business, you might have known who his dad was, but generally you wouldn't know who Lance Stroll was in that point anyway.
No, and I've got such a good life that I'm never desperate that I want the job. So I even with that one, I think what probably threw them a lot was like, look, I might be the one for you, I might not. If this works, great. If not, fantastic. I love what you're doing, and I hope you do well. But it was very much, I was already doing other good stuff. So, I appreciated the flight over to Europe and to go see where they were, but I certainly wasn't desperate for the job. I had other things going on. So I wasn't sure whether it was right for me either. And as I said, I'm not really, that works sometimes in my favor, and other times I've had athletes sort of say to me, Dan, I'm sort of a big deal. It's like, I've written many books and I'm very, very, very famous. So I've had athletes tell me that before. I'm like, yeah, can you just this, you're just one of them.
Yeah, that's the best. I think famous people appreciate it when you don't, fanboy or fangirl them.
For sure.
Tell us about that 10 months though. Like, give us was it 10 months you were with them?
Yeah, about 10 months. So they, it was.
How much of it are you allowed to speak about? Don't get us sued, but just.
Yeah, you're right. Like you're right. You do have to be careful in the same way that I suppose I can get too comfortable talking to you, Shauna, because you're an old mate. So I have to be a little smart, and the same about talking about China, I guess. It's definitely unique, right? Like these people haven't got a very similar life. We're flying everywhere in private jets. And there's certainly some stories that you're right aren't probably appropriate to tell, but what you can see is that they definitely live a different life, and it's not better. Some people can often think, now, sure, there's all the glory parts of it, sort of saying, staying obviously amazing hotels, you're flying everywhere by jets and helicopters. We wouldn't drive anywhere that was any more than an hour. We would fly a helicopter, or we would get a plane there. So there was nowhere that we weren't going that wasn't amazing, and that's lovely. But the happiness side of things, there's who's it? Thomas Sowell that sort of says there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs. So great, you have money and you have these things that are luxurious, but also, I think the trust of people can go down because there's always the feeling of like, are you friends with me for me, or are you friends with me because I got my money, because I've got money, or so I could definitely feel there's big trade-offs to having all that abundance. And it's not,
because they're not just a little bit wealthy.
No.
They're seriously wealthy.
Yeah, no, they're definitely.
Yeah. Was there any crazy stories that without, as I said, like without sort of tipping anyone or hurting anyone's reputation, was there any stories of opulence or stories of, fascination that sort of stick out?
I suppose that there's lots of them actually, mate. But I suppose that one of the ones that I was like, that we were trying to decide what we wanted to do for a session this week, and we were living in Geneva, so we couldn't decide what we were going to, what Lance wanted to do. The good thing about Formula One or some of the car racing is you need a lot of just general fitness. So there's lots of variation you can do. It doesn't have to be like volleyball. Okay, we're hitting and power type thing. So we can do a lot of things.
So were you doing not just physio? Were you also like personal training as well?
Yeah,
is that part of it?
Yeah, sorry, mate. So that's part of my exercise.
So it wasn't just
part. Yeah. So
yeah, right. So it wasn't just sort of making sure he wasn't injured. It was also keeping him fit, running him hard, and keeping his body in great condition.
Yeah, absolutely. So
daily routines, workout plans. Yep.
Yeah. So I suppose what I get to be nowadays, Seano, is I suppose the best description is sort of like a performance coach, right? Because really, we all know there's only the same few facets of being a really good athlete or human, or even the health-wise. You need your physical performance. Make sure you're not injured, which is the physio part. The mindset part, which is obviously something I'm passionate about and love, and then nutrition, and then sleep and recovery. So those few pillars, I'm lucky enough to have education in at least two, partly almost three of them just from a passion and nutrition. So anyway, I was doing that with him, but yeah, we had many options. Here's the abundance part where we're trying to work out what session we're going to do. And because he couldn't decide, which is okay, he's still a young kid, by the way, so he couldn't decide what he wanted to do. So we had 4 or 5 things lined up. We had a helicopter ready to fly to Mount Blanc and walk up the hill with a guide. We had our jet ski and our wakeboard drivers ready. We had the bike, because we're obviously in the Geneva Hills, so we've got these beautiful bikes that every cyclist would just dream of, every gym. And again, we couldn't just
top shelf,
just ready
every
to go.
tour, every map,
everything.
Yeah,
just ready to go. And then and of course he's a young kid, so he's like, I just want to get on a wind trainer in the room. It was like, oh my God, we could do that or go there, or we could have a run around the lake. We could go kayaking, and all these people are actually just ready. We've got them just on standby. So there's lots of those things like that.
And you ended up just hitting a wind trainer indoors, like the equivalent of a treadmill.
It was killing me, man. I was like, oh man, we could do so many things, but that's epic. So there was lots of those sort of things.
I guess what a great experience, so that that money isn't necessarily the answer. It's something that, a bit like your dyslexia, that you've got this diagnosis, right? So now you can use it, and and I feel like we all diagnose ourselves as poor, it's such a common diagnosis to be broke, and hang all your problems on that, but we don't realize that is probably like one of the major mass diagnoses going around, is I'm broke.
Right. Yeah. And even when you say that, Sean, like one of the big things I recognise going back to Australia, and sadly, I see a lot of the victim mentality back there, and people just don't realise that we all do it. We all do it, and I like to talk about it because I enjoy catching myself on it. All these little tidbits. I like discussing it because it's like a reminder of, we always look up, and it's like, oh yeah, you're looking at who's more rich than you, but don't forget Australia. Like we're in the top. Everybody in Australia, you're in the top 0.0 richest people. I think you're top 2 in the median, and then top 5 in the mean of the richest people in the world.
Us. Don't forget you're an Aussie as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I meant that. Yeah, don't worry. I haven't given away my passport. You're pointing at me like you. Sorry, definitely us. Well, mate, I realise how lucky I am, but I still need that sometimes, because we all get stuck in, as I said, including me. The reason I like talking about it is not pointing fingers at anybody. It's because I like to be able to say, man, you don't forget, if you're the luckiest 0.0000%, of the timeline, of finances, of so many. The fact you've got a good loving relationship, you've got family that you speak to, your body can move. It's like you're already for the financial part, you're already in the top 5%. And as you say, everyone in Australia's like, I'm broke. It's like, you don't know what broke is, man. Compared to the rest of the world, you are the 5%. You are the 2%.
It's wild. Like even I went to a shopping centre last night with my kids, and there was a guy playing music. There was an open space where kids were dancing and running around. All the shops, were open. It was safe. If something happened, someone would come out and clean it. Like for example, if you dropped something on the floor, there'd be a cleaner there within minutes. And we don't even realise that this is just unheard of in parts of the world. Like if someone started hitting someone right there, it would take a minute before security or something, and there's parts of the world that are just devoid of safety. They're just chaotic. And and I think what happens is, you see young travelers, for example, and I've seen it when I went to Vietnam, they forget that safety net's not there. And they find themselves out at night getting drunk or being stupid, and they find themselves in dangerous situations real quick. But that is the product of having a wealthy nation, and unfortunately, with as a country grows in its wealth and its abundance, and we reduce our problems, I feel that then we start to look at everything through different lenses, whereas when you're in like those poorer nations and countries that haven't evolved to this level of wealth, which we mainly see in in the Western countries, France, UK, America, and us. That now we've sort of turned this a corner where I feel that maybe somewhere in the last maybe 10 years, everything started to be looked at through the lens of oppressor and oppressed. And everything comes sort of like through that lens, in the sense that there's beyond. It used to be when I was younger that we had sympathy for anyone that wasn't doing as well, and we would try to assist. Now it's kind of gone that there's almost like a virtue, or there's a good guy, bad guy, good and bad, a good and evil now, whereas the oppressed are good and the people, the oppressors or the victors are, so anyone doing well is now an oppressor. I don't know if that makes sense.
Completely.
And it's just a good and evil. It's just a good, and unfortunately, I think we've taken on this sort of self-loathing, because we are the oppressors in a lot of people's minds.
You've hit on so many good things there, man. You're so spot on with so much of it. There's two things that you triggered me with. One is just making things so simple, right? Anything that is just such a simple narrative, oppressor, oppressed. It's like once you've narrowed it down to that, something that can be put on a billboard, you've lost all nuance. You've been ideologically taken over when you're just like, defund the police, or oppress. It's like, come on, man, it's more complicated than that. And once you're in that, I know you and I have discussed it before, but it is one of the only things that I hold true. It's like, the only thing I'm 100% sure of is if you're 100%, I don't trust you. If you can't honestly steel man another viewpoint and find the nuance in it, you've stopped thinking. You've stopped critically thinking. So, and I think you're right about the.
Well, I always look at it in the sense that, just to add to what you're saying, I always look at it in the sense that be very wary of people who make a very complicated problem simple. So, for example, politics, left and right, racism, all these very complicated situations make them very simple, and then make very simple parts of life complicated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Tell me the simple ones you think about.
A good one about making simple problems complicated is just take education, for example, right? A lot of these kids are put into classrooms where they are not prepared, they're not well fed, they're not they're not well slept, they come from traumatized homes or stressful backgrounds, or The teacher is half asleep. The curriculum is poorly presented. And we've got a simple situation, right?
Yep.
That we need to just kind of invest more time and energy in educating these kids and kind of work with them to solve the simple problems, like get them to school on time, make sure they got full bellies, make sure they're not filled with processed foods. But no. That's not the problem.
Yeah.
Let's complexify this, and we introduce all the raft of medications, the raft of diagnoses, the raft of therapists, the raft of detentions.
Yeah.
Who knows? It's just all this stuff, but it's really simple. The kid's just school's not working for that kid. We need to kind of undercut it.
Yeah.
And get this kid to to learn properly. Or give him a good home environment. But instead of those sort of problems, we kind of come up with these other issues.
Do you think we like the drama of it, Shauno, or what? Is it?
I think it's. My brother disagrees with me on this, but I sort of say, well, maybe he does. He doesn't totally disagree, but maybe it's not a fully rounded statement into saying that we don't live in community anymore, or we don't live in a society anymore. We live in an economy. So I feel that things make more sense when you look at them from the viewpoint of an economy.
Yeah.
Right. So when you're looking at why schools don't work, and you think it's crazy, why do all these kids graduate illiterate? Well, it's not crazy when you actually follow the money, as they say.
The incentive of the money.
If you think, well, why are these things happening? Why does it take so long to build something, for example? And why does the budget blow out? It was a $5 million budget, and here we are at $40 million. It's not finished.
And Sean, this is why I love what you're doing, man. Like it needs someone like you who's curious. These are the sorts of things that I think should be talked about. I don't think I'm the person for that, to be honest. But I love that it needs to be. Like somebody. It feels like that's not talked about enough. Some of those incentives that have, shall I say, ulterior motives, or they've got confounding variables to them. Conflicting interests that are going on. I love and the way that you come about things. I know we've talked about it before off here, but the fact that you're asking people and challenging them on the ideas of this, rather than it just being one mainstream thing that's being said. It's sorely missing from what I see. So it's sorely missing what's in Australia, and it needs somebody who's curious.
Oh man, I just want to. I mean, that's what I observe. I'm happy for someone to tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I just observe that, and having a business background, I see it in business.
Yeah.
For example, we've got a cost of living crisis going on at the moment, and there's a whole bunch of houses that are being built out of town here, let's just say, and the new building code means that we need to have. So there's all these new rules basically that add about $150,000 to the average home build.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
And
all the extra.
No one's really sat down and asked, well, is that really? And I don't want to sound like. It's tough to say this without offending people, but let me just say that, like, say the modifications are for wheelchair access, for example.
Yeah.
Right? So on one hand, we've got a need to support people who are disabled.
Yep.
And I get that. And we want to have homes that can be occupied by people who are disabled. And on the other hand, we've got this massive housing crisis. So we need to make homes more affordable to build. Now, I'm not saying one is greater than the other, but has anyone ever done a cost-benefit analysis on that and actually gone?
Yeah.
And they haven't, because one equals more money and more debt and more productivity for those that, the banks and that's why it's gone that way.
Yep.
And a lot of these things, your mind boggles. And if you talk to any builder, we just got the latest 7-star building updates for homes now. They need to be 7-star. It adds another, your hot water service that used to be, $500, $1,000 is now a $5,000 or $6,000 7-star system.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild. So
Bro, see,
what's the greatest good here?
Those things definitely frustrate me. I can find myself going down those avenues, and I know somebody needs to take a little bit of the bull by the horns. But what I find is I get frustrated with it, and then I keep going back to the things that I can control. So sometimes I can be allured down to, being dyslexic. I spend a lot of time listening to people. I listen to a lot of authors rather than read them. So I'm always listening to, personal development or finance or, the physio or strength. And then, of course, the politics stuff comes up, and it's alluring to get into. And every time I do it, I find that I get frustrated because I see that these have real world events that affect people and people I love in a really negative way. And then I keep coming back to, and it's alluring. It's interesting how it's the easiest one to press. When I get up and go for a run in the morning or go do something, the easiest one when my brain hasn't woken up is this one that makes you a little bit angry. And it does. It makes me frustrated. And then I come back to, hey, these aren't things you're controlling. So get back to, stop looking out there. I've got no influence on what the government's doing and what they're doing there. Now, it's a different place if you plan to do something about it. And that's why I think someone like you can and should. But I look and just like, Dan, stop it. You're losing all your energy there. Go back to what I'm doing. It's so easy to keep pointing fingers.
But I think we're at a point now where, I agree. But at some point, this is where I guess we rely on our politicians, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's too much money in politics.
Yep.
And until we get the money and the politics separated, we're always going to have this problem, because the problem you're going to get is that a politician will come in with the intention to change all this. So he'll get voted in on the idea.
Yeah.
But then once he's in there, there's costs to stay in government, right?
And as you say,
need costs, and you need marketing, you need the lawyers, you need all that stuff. And so you're going to have to compromise.
Yeah.
And so this is where I think, your old school religious ran societies, they had their own versions of corruption, right? They had their own versions. It might not have been money, but there was still, the human element. Truth is, man, I got no idea what the future holds, but I think that I just think it's tough when you're dealing with just naive people. I think the one thing I can't abide is just naivety. I don't think I can do a whole lot about it either, to be honest, but I can at least not sit there and just gobble up the bullshit that comes out, and and have these politicians and newspapers just the ABC and Channel 7 and just put all this bullshit there, and me be expected to go, oh, wow, this is really great. You guys really do care about, LGBT community, or you do care about Pride Month, or you do care about, violence against women. No, you don't.
Yeah, it's incentive.
You really don't.
And they've only got a few years to. They're doing all the things that sound. You swap things that sound good for things that work for things that sound good, and that's what it feels like it's done. But again, I keep going down that path, and I know what you're saying when you watch the TV and stuff, and I just have to stop myself and be like, you only have a certain amount of effect. You're not, it's wasted energy to keep focusing on that. So then I just keep coming back. And we've all got, there's a few things about it. One is I don't believe that I know it either, right? I'm humble enough to be like, man, I wouldn't want the decisions of people who had during COVID in Australia. I wouldn't want those decisions. They're complex, and they've all got trade-offs, and they're nasty, and there's no good outcome either way. I don't want them. I think I have an opinion, and that's when I stop myself and be like, number one, Dan, you can have an opinion, but hold it lightly, because you don't really know everything. I don't even know everything about the body, and I've been studying it for so long, it's so many things. And then come back to, I've got enough things to work on myself. I've got enough demons to work on, and things I can be better at in a relationship and physically, giving some more, what other things can I do? So stop wasting my time with that stuff. So it's alluring though. I find myself doing it and then coming back like, okay, what can you affect? Who can you contribute to? What can you do? And it's sadly, it's not those things. And every time I get enticed to watch them,
it is those things though. I think you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised, I think, how much. I think it's that concentric circles type, like once you actually are able to take care of yourself, and once you actually learn and things that make you a better person, and you objectively can see that, hey, I was feeling sad, I'm feeling better.
Yeah.
Hey, I was weak and now I'm strong. I was anxious, now I'm calm, right? All those things that you learn about yourself, you then, being a good human, you then want to actually pass that on to other people.
Yep.
And the reason that it frustrates you is because you don't want people, you want to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
So until you actually admit that it actually that you have to do something about it, it's where the frustration lies. Is that you're just shaking your fists at the sky.
Yeah,
you're getting all riled up and then going
Yeah.
But I think that having that's probably part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast, because it's about people talking to one another. And the whole Trump election that's happening at the moment has been amazing to see so many people that had no interest in politics at all 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Even myself, I'd have to say 10 years ago, I just didn't really, 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, I really just had no idea.
Yeah.
But now everyone is, well, not everyone, but a lot of people are a lot more engaged, and I think it's really healthy that people are actually having some conversations about it.
If they are,
and
which is what you're encouraging.
Yeah. Well, podcasts are going off.
Yeah.
People are going, like Donald Trump was on Patrick Bet-David. He was on Andrew Schultz, and he's going to go on Rogan in a couple of days, So that is huge, So whether you love Trump or not, I think that hearing a long-form 2-hour, 3-hour conversation with a president or a running president, when's that ever happened? When was the last time someone a candidate has ever sat there and spoken for that long?
Yeah.
I mean, just given the podcasts that he's done already.
Yeah.
As I said, I mean, I am a Trump. I would definitely be voting Trump at the moment, but I don't think that I could see why people don't like him. That's fine. But I can say for sure that I've never heard any elected person in history speak for that long.
Yeah.
So far, just on the podcast he's done at the moment, we're talking about 4 or 5 hours.
Yep.
So then if you add a Joe Rogan on there as well, 6 or 7 hours of maybe more of podcast chat time.
Yep.
That's never happened before.
No.
And I think that if we actually start getting the youth a bit more interested in this, and we start getting younger kids who listen to these people, forming opinions before it's too late, because, we need the youth, we need those sort of young adults interested.
Yeah.
Once everyone becomes conservative when they hit their 40s and 50s because you just get old and less, but most people become more conservative, I should say, not necessarily conservative, but I think, as you get older, you start to sort of just, trim your viewpoints a bit, start to become a little bit less, maybe this, and you become a bit more wise as to, hang on, all that stuff I heard in my, at school and in my 20s, maybe that wasn't really,
perfect. Yeah. Well, again, it's a thing.
So if we get the answer, I think, is just more conversation around it, and making it noble and culturally noble to be a good person.
Definitely. I love what you're saying about the culture part of being noble, but I think, at an individual level, again, I think we can get lost in all the what's happening now and the distraction of it. But you hit on something that I think everybody can do, and is I say I'm not doing a lot, but what you're doing and what I do in my small circle is be able to have conversations that there's no judgment of. Again, you start off with a humble place of we don't know everything. Let's start with that, and let's start with the fact that your opinion isn't an indication of who you are. It's just an opinion that you can change. And, one of the beautiful things I've got sort of a few group of friends that one is ideologically right and left. And I don't even like those terms because, again, it's just a bracketed thing and it depends on what topic. But either way, there's a really lovely discussion that doesn't have any judgment about it. And you find your own cognitive biases. So what you're looking for is not to tell other people what is right and wrong. You're looking curiously about how consistent is my thought patterns and where is it lost? And I want challenge from this and this, and that if you come about that from the place like I've seen all your podcasts do, in the fact that I'm actually genuinely curious whether you had the Greens leader on from Queensland or you had the party guy on from Freedom Party guy from Victoria. I'm curious about what you're thinking, and that is how you actually change things.
And they all have very good points, and the thing that, you could get everyone to agree on, like take a situation like a controversial subject like trans rights. I think that most people would agree that if someone's trans, we want them to have the best life they can have.
Yep.
I don't think left or right, I don't think anyone's going to argue that.
Yep.
So what happens is we get suckered into these ridiculous, like we get suckered into, or another one is abortion.
Yeah. Everyone's just a half an inch away from each other, man. They're so close.
People will argue about the weeks that you're allowed and this and that, but it's like everyone agrees generally on the basic principles of that argument. It's really funny how close together we all are. So what I think, if when it comes to left and right politics, I think I'm a liberal in the sense of freedom. I believe in freedom for everyone.
Yep.
So I believe in freedom, and I believe in progression, and I believe in people being able to follow whatever they want to do.
Yep.
So there's no real left and right political party for me. There's just the party that is not control, is not it's just establishment and non-establishment is kind of all I can see at the moment. Yep. I just want someone who, and I guess that's why I'd vote Trump more than anything, is because I actually believe it's his party,
right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, gotcha.
I believe that you get what you see with this guy.
Yeah.
You might not agree with it all, but at least I can say at least I know what we're kind of going to get.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm yet to be proven wrong, but the thing I find with politicians is the amount of lying, the amount of flipping and flopping on their ideas, the amount of times that they'll say one thing and then change it as soon as they get into power, or say what they need to say to keep the media happy, but then really be thinking or moving another way.
Yeah.
And it's scandalous, So the money in politics is the main issue, but I think that people like yourself and I can just have these conversations and get smarter as well within ourselves, and actually have the time to actually introspect a little bit and think about what we're thinking.
Yeah, and I like that, man. Like sometimes when I like the challenge of it. You have to be able to sort of see that you're wrong. One of the things, some of the, particularly when it gets easy to hate some politicians, it's like, just remember that guy's just he thinks he's doing the right thing. Most people genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. Now, when you come about it from that, it takes out a lot of that hate and the vitriol that's like, I'm on this side. Also, too, I think anybody is on one side of politics through every topic. Again, you've been ideologically taken over. You've stopped critically thinking. You're not one side or the
100%.
other. You have to take each topic as it comes about and then discuss. As you say, most of them are the same, man. There's that much difference between the majority of it. And you're right, we get sensationalized to talk about the differences. Oh, we're against each other. It's like, hold on a second, we all agree that we want a flourishing country that is economically growing, and at the same time we look after the people who are fallen behind, who are disadvantaged. We're all in agreement. And then it gets down to, okay, how much money should we use, or how much tax should we use on this and this? It's like, guys, we're on the same. Like we're talking about, okay, it goes up this percentage of this. You're not that far apart.
Maybe this idea of getting, money out of politics and getting a society that bases its decisions on human progress and human happiness or joy or fulfillment as its target, rather than financial fulfillment, is actually what we need to move towards. So having this discussion about AI, I don't know how much is AI in coming into your industry, or is it sort of?
But I'm behind the eight ball, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, things like radiographers and, I think about reading x-rays and reading scans and reading blood tests and all that. these are things that AI are already able to do, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these things that are happening, but how does that increase the value of a society? How does that increase the fulfillment of life? And when we actually look at these jobs, like rather than, imagine having a government that said, no, we want to keep our culture. We want to have checkout staff.
Yeah.
We want to have, people at the airport that welcome you and say, enjoy your flight and stick your bag on the plane.
Yeah.
Imagine we actually somehow legislated towards keeping a society communicating with each other so that your neighbor isn't evil, because you talk to 20 people a day.
Yeah.
So they're actually all good people. You don't live in fear anymore. You know what I mean?
No, completely,
This
man.
is the move that we need to get to. These are the things that we need to make priorities.
I don't know if that just has to happen again more at the individual level, man. Like all from a societal point, like all that Steven Pinker side of things has never been a better place to be at, right? Like in a historical place. Yet at the same time, the biggest thing we have happening is all the deaths of, the actual how long we live is, certainly in America anyway, started to tip down just from deaths of suicide or overdose. So every other thing, mortality rate, infant death, education, all those things are going up in the right direction. But as you sort of say, the part of it is the mental health side of things. Now, will AI help that? I don't know how much of an effect. You keep sort of talking again about the government side of things. I think it's back to the individual level. And I'm not sure if you can change that much of it. That the whole pattern of where the society's going, what's that statement of, rough seas make good sailors and good sailors make calm seas that make bad sailors, or whatever it is. If I've messed that up, but essentially
something like that. But
it's maybe just the cycle, right? That you're just like, okay, we've had such a good period. I would love to see if we can change it a bit, but again, I can't focus that much on that. It's got to be at the smaller circle part, I think.
But you know what we were saying before about complexity and simplicity, and you said, give me some examples of making simple things complex.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of a great example at the time, but when you assess someone, for example, and they're not doing well and they're struggling, they're a little bit depressed, and they're not really winning, right? Yeah. And you looked at them and they had a BMI of say 29 or 30.
Yeah.
What would be the first thing that you would recommend? Like, what would it seem completely obvious to you that needs to be fixed?
Well, sure, right? Yeah, sure. There's one way that says what's the easiest, what is the obvious one, but what are they willing to fix? How can you break into that circle anyway? It might just be sleep or confidence to be able to help them lose weight. Like it's which one are they? It's not only what needs to be changed, what is willing and can be changed. To break that cycle. I think.
Yeah, but you can identify what the actual issue is, quite, I guess, simply.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It would seem that being overweight is a simple issue in a sense, right? Like, I'm not saying it's easy to fix, but it's a simple that's a big problem. A simple cause and effect.
Yeah.
The purpose of a government is to protect its citizens and do everything it can to help the prosperity of their people.
Yep. So
when a government no longer does that, I think I definitely find I love the idea of having good government.
Yep.
I think it can make a society unbelievable. And you've lived in different countries, so you've seen like Japan, the way they are governed and the way their culture is encouraged and the things that their society values. Yeah. It's impressed upon them through the public system, and if you get a government starting to put up signs like on billboards, and in the same way that we all felt terrible when we didn't wear a mask because someone was going to, someone close to us was going to die. Yeah. That was the message we got. Imagine the messaging was, this phone is possibly destroying your daughter's life.
Yeah.
You would find mums all over the country yanking their phones off their kids, and they'd be at parties talking about how good they are at keeping their kids off phones.
Yeah.
Because it would be like a virtue signal, right?
Yeah. If Sean could be king for the day, for like a day, have his 5 best rules to get into government, what would you do? Just by the way, I'd vote for you for king. But, if you could get in there, what would be your first things that you're like, okay, because there's a lot in there. Like I get it, some parts are at a cultural level and other parts are at a regulatory level, like what you're sort of saying.
I just honestly, look, I mean, obviously that's a wild question to ask because I've never thought of it before, I think the first thing I would do is gather up a diverse range of people. So first thing would be to get a representative group of the population. The second thing would be just take statistics on everything.
Right. Yeah. Economy.
So I don't know is the answer.
Yeah. Which is what you'd love a politician to say sometimes. You never get that, man.
What would be – no, but I mean not so much not from a financial point of view, but like so what are the rates of homelessness? What are the rates of suicide? So get someone to compile all the data and then get people to talk about what's actually causing the biggest problems in our society.
Yeah, social economist.
And gradually –
I meant to say not just economist.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But yeah, and really then just start targeting the biggest problems first without consideration of the monetary value.
Have you seen the guy who's done Bjorn Longberg? Have you seen his stuff? He's done that. It's crazy how he's
Bjorn
done that. He uses a whole heap of Nobel Prize winners and whatever else, and he rates the things on like what's the best value for dollar for the that's actually there. People, we could use that. He gets used but again, it becomes political, and once anybody doesn't like, they can throw a word at him, and then he's this, and it's like, oh man. So there's those avenues to do.
Well, Douglas Murray has a great expression, which is facts cause chaos. Oh. And I was explaining this the other day that it was a strange thing to state, facts cause chaos. But it's actually funny that if you were actually there are certain facts out there that no one wants to hear. Yeah. Right. So and they would cause great inconvenience. Yeah. And like, for example, if you were to say a certain race is smarter than a certain other race, could you imagine? Yeah. But that data's out there. Yeah. Or if you were to say that, people who are this are also that. Yeah. These are things we don't want to know. Yeah. And they are that data is very difficult to collect. Yeah. And obviously in the wrong hands, it could cause chaos. Yeah. Could you imagine if all people with, say, just pick all people with brown eyes are more are less trustworthy or something like that. Yeah. This data given to the wrong people could cause absolute chaos. And I mean, the biggest sort of problem, or not problem, but the thing that Bjorn Longberg.
Bjorn Longberg.
Yeah. The biggest problem he runs into is that, for example, anyone that thinks that putting their glass into a separate bin, that two diesel trucks, now there's two separate trucks doing runs to collect the garbage and one to collect the recycling, and then that glass then gets put into this big box and then shipped all the way on another big diesel container over to China, where it's smelted and crushed down, and then and then little kids would cut their hands up on it. And anyone that thinks that is a better way of dealing with a glass bottle, that you've never stopped to think about.
Yeah, you're hiding the problem. Again.
I mean, up until only a few years ago, a lot of these countries were just burning our recycling. They were just burning it. Yeah. And we were saying we were recycling, but all we were doing was selling it, or we were basically paying countries to dispose of it. But we don't care what they do with it. Yeah. And a lot of them were just burning it for energy. Now, Bjorn Longberg does an explanation that if you chuck all your rubbish out locally and you incinerate it, and you have the filtration systems that catch all the crap, basically, it's actually the most efficient way to get rid of your trash. Yeah. And the other way is stop making so much of it.
I just like that he does it on a comparison level of like, okay, yeah, cool. They've all got trade-offs again. This is how much this would cost, but
exactly.
It's like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But people don't want to hear that,
No.
People don't want to hear that. And, there's all these words that you can't say, like climate change and, right wing, left wing, communism. Like I look at a lot of left wing politics, and I wonder why they don't associate it. Like they won't say the word communism.
Yeah, right.
Why? Obviously, it doesn't test well.
You're right. It doesn't test well. I think that's...
It mustn't. Because it is communism, right?
Yeah.
Like it is actually going towards communism or socialism at least.
Yeah.
But they'll never say that word. And I feel like what I'd prefer is if you're a communist, cool. Can we talk about this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I think
Tell me why that's a better system.
Even there's the words in that, Shauna, that like you are a communist. Like I think that's almost a big base of the problem is that people are being identified as a thought. It's like we've got to disassociate that because people will. You're not willing to argue because now I'm attacking you. You're the problem because you hold this idea and that's you. Whereas like, mate, this is just an idea. This isn't who I am. It's so hard for people to realize. And I've played mental games with this too, things that I really think are important. So I'm a physio. No, that's something you do. And I play games with it. Like if I lose that, or I was a husband, if I lose that, am I still me? That's not who you are. They're things you do. I'm a brother. I'm a son. I'm a friend. You have to play the game of saying you aren't this thing. That's not you. They're things you do. And I think the idea of politics or any of these ideas, people attach to them. I'm a right winger. I'm a left winger. I'm a communist. I'm a this.
Absolutely.
It's like, dude, you're not any of those things. Detach from it. What's the idea? Coleman Hughes is a really good, I'm not sure if you've seen some of him, but he's awesome. Like a philosopher, American guy, really well-balanced, lovely fella, really cool, very insightful. Anyway, keep your identity as small as possible. You're not these things, detach from them. And then you can discuss them and be like, man, I don't know. I think communism has an idea. Well, I think this has an idea. It's not me. No one's attacking me because I don't even hold these ideas aren't nothing. Tomorrow I'll change, So.
Well, I think that's it, right? Like I think we need to look at all these problems that we're trying to solve and then the approach.
Yeah.
Now with what happens is you get tribalism or you get this sort of division where my team wants to do it this way and your team wants to do it that way, and you've got to agree with everything that your team ascribes to. Whereas you might only agree to, like you said, you might only agree to 3 or 4 of those things. And that's how I feel about what's happening in the US at the moment is like, I probably only agree with 7 out of 10 of the ways things are, but I'm not, that doesn't mean I'm going to agree with the other 3 things just because it's the team that I'm sort of going with. If that makes sense.
Absolutely it does.
But you need, there are like you said, it's nuance, and what we're running into at the moment, and you can see it so blatantly when you get these vox pop sort of street interviews with people where they're asked questions and it's like, there's no rational thought going on. It's just the repetition of the mantra or the line that they've been told to say. Very scary stuff. I mean, that we've seen through history where that sort of stuff goes.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
That's where you need protection from it. Like we're all part of that. That cognitive dissonance. We don't like to believe we're wrong. That's why you need the conversation of it. Tribalism, as you sort of say, these are those things in the brain that are set up from an evolutionary standpoint, whether it's the negative bias thing that you have to offset. And if you're not cognitive of it, no wonder you're sitting in a corner and depressed, whether it's that or the tribalism part. We automatically go towards, good tribalism of a footy team. But you see how easily that goes into, or the Olympics, we're tribalized. But you have to be, if you're not aware of that and you're not having someone challenging you on it, having the friendly enough conversation, but challenging enough to be like, hey man, is that, have you just fallen into just groupthink there? You just started to realize, you've started to tribalize by your skin color or that's the honest one. It's so amazing to me that those 2 things are just so perverse for people that they can't get around. They can't get around. I know I saw the balloons come up too. They can't get, that comes up. They can't get around race and gender. It's like they're that's a tribal thing that you're just so attached to. That isn't the problem. Look at the actual, I get why you're trying to do it. You're trying to narrow down where the problem is, but go towards, there's a better proxy for it every time. If you want to help people in disadvantaged, work out what the disadvantage is and go towards that. Your brain has just already gone tribal. Okay, what's a tribal thing? Frankston and Broadmeadows, race, gender. It's like they're not against each other. Help the people who are the most disadvantaged.
The other thing is though, when you've got when you've got these, like we were saying about these fat governments and these overweight sort of spending budgets and these extremely wasteful and inefficient programs, they don't ever I guess measure their results.
Yeah.
So
how is that possible?
If you actually look at well, I can tell you right. Here's a great example. So
I can see you're just trying to upset me again, Sean. I keep trying to get away from politics. It's just because every time I can see you keep trying to drag me back in.
Well, let me just have one more look at it.
I was going to say before, how is it that somebody from Broadmeadows and Frankston finished up? I was going to ask, what do you think your strength was to, we both, for the people who don't know, Frankston and Broadmeadows is some of the upper class parts of Melbourne.
The Paris end of Melbourne.
What was it what were the strengths that you think you had that made you? You're obviously a very successful in person and in business. What was it that made you think what got you out of that? Because most of the people in Broadmeadows and Frankston are still struggling, man. And I think both of us have got a pretty good life. What were the key characteristics?
Well, I like to think, I just don't know.
Yeah.
I know that having a great sense of humour has been key. Like I've always been someone who knew how to have a laugh. And I think honestly it opens doors, when you're actually a fun person. And I think I got that from my family. I think I had a great family unit growing up and we were always, my older brother is just very similar. We were just very, hilarious, and I think there's some sort of confidence that we had that made us, I guess, comfortable in our skin. So we would find ourselves in these strange places, and even to this day, I was at a table the other day with 4 doctors who were very advanced in their fields, all had PhDs. And I was just like able to say, man, how did I get a seat at this table? I'm not sure I'm in the right place, and be able to joke even as an adult, even as an adult to just sort of get everyone to relax and just stop with the, and I often hear the expression throughout my life. I've often heard the phrase, I've never said that to anyone before. And I think because I'm a deep person, I think I don't talk about the weather. I ask people about those tough questions. I talk about those things you're not meant to talk about. Religion, politics, beliefs, UFOs, man versus woman, battle of the sexes, gender, all this stuff. I feel that I'm a curious, observant person.
Who's hilarious.
That's just
the human part too.
So I just think that's kind of, I guess, my personality and fear, because I really just didn't want to. I saw a lot of friends die. I saw lost a lot of friends, and I held my best mate's. I'll start crying in a second, but I held my best mate's hand in hospital after he had in his last moments, because he had basically decided it was enough, and that's something that really gets you thinking at 20 years old, So, it's a horrible thing to be motivated by, but as we were saying before, you can be a victim, or you can actually use these things as fuel, and you can actually say, I'm not going to let that happen to me. And also, seeing what you see, like I could have seen all these things and listened to those people who would make it all complicated. It wasn't complicated. It was drugs. It was no purpose. It was abuse, and it ended his life, Now, it wasn't mental illness. It wasn't all this bullshit. It wasn't that. It was a really tough upbringing. you know.
Do you,
That's what did it.
do you remember there was a time
I listened
that-
to the doctors and the experts and all that, and I didn't want to. Yeah, I do remember that. That was the time. That was the actual time.
Yeah.
That was the time when I lost faith in everything. Really, I lost faith in. I stopped believing everyone. I stopped believing the church. I stopped believing the cops. I stopped believing the doctors, and I started just looking for myself.
Yeah, that curious part again.
Yeah, that was the time.
Yeah, mate, that death part.
And I had, yeah, it was awful.
I bet, man. Oh, yeah.
And I had to go to his funeral and listen to people talk about his mental health and talk about how, you know, it could happen to anyone. And I was like, it fucking won't happen to anyone if you don't, you know, put kids through these awful existences and then, you know, feed them with mind-altering drugs.
Yeah.
And then the worst thing about it was after he actually had a psychotic break, he actually was routed, you know, directed to the people that were meant to help him. And it was those people in the psychologists and psychotherapists, they were the ones that, you know, gave him the ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy, which is where they strap electrodes on your head and zap you. Don't know who thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
They were the ones that put him on all these mind-altering medications that actually, I think, pushed him over the edge.
Wow. Yeah.
And, you know, there'll never be any discussion. And actually 3 of the kids I went to high school with went down that exact path, you know, as in had some sort of episode from drugs, ended up in, you know, psychiatric care and ended up dead, you know.
And from their own doing, right? From their own doing.
Yeah. Yeah, but also trouble. They were troubled.
Yeah.
And the support wasn't there, you know. And troubled families don't just happen because, you know, dad's abusive or there's other things going on in the world, right? There's pressures, there's financial pressures, then there's the school pressures and then there's the peer pressures, you know. So I was very fortunate to never have any of that.
Yeah.
You know, I was happy. I was very happy. So, you know, I was overweight.
No, not that I remember, mate. Not that I remember.
No, you saw me after I lost it all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was a fat kid.
Yeah.
And that makes for a very unhappy life.
Well, maybe that's where the humour came from. That does make for an unhappy life. It's a big part, right?
Had to develop my personality. I did though. Yeah. I seriously did. Yeah. I couldn't talk to girls and things like that. You know, I was very jealous of guys who, you know, who could go to the beach and just take their shirt off. Like, oof, you know, I used to just envy that.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
And those just basic things, man, as you sort of say, when you try to make things more complicated, you know, those same basic things of physical, you know, whether it's from a place of disease, of like, you know, depression or troubled place, you know, they're just the same pillars of this to elite health. You know, it's the same thing that gets you out of, you know,
100%.
Helps you with cancer and diabetes and being overweight and depression. And they're exactly the same pillars that we use for elite athletes. They're not that, like you say, we make it so complicated. It's the same basic things. Now you can go into detail on each one. You can say, okay, exercise, I need to exercise. You just got to do it, man. Now you can go into detail of the strength and then the cardio side and go down. But really, there's just only those 4 pillars. It's like, have a look at whichever one you want to pick. And that's what I mean. When you keep focusing on other people, I can work on those 4 to 5. So there's just detail after detail that I can go down into and just keep working on those, you know, be a better human, the purpose part of it, you know, the mindset, the body, you know, the nutrition, the sleep and recovery. It's like, man, and the mindset part.
Outside your work circle, how do you go with, I guess, friends and family that are just not on that page or that you're dealing with people? How do you go about helping people or trying to help people? You must know people that could use your help. How do you go about, and have you had situations where it's frustrated you that people can't see how much life they could have if they did things differently? For sure.
And, you know, I know that, you know, we talked about it before that I sort of help with Lifeline occasionally too, right? So they the same part of they're just, people are at different levels. So you just got to find whatever level people are at. I mean, I need this too, you know, like it's not like everybody's going through just hard times. I use you for it one day, you know, and the next day you're going to call me, you know. So different people are just at different stages, and whichever stage they're willing to help out. I'm trying to get better at, I think we talked about last time, at just listening. Because even just that, man, sometimes people just need to have a fucking cry and just so I think everybody needs, then you also need the mates like yourself who like, Dan, that's not good enough. You're better than that. Nah, I'm not letting you get away with it. That's bullshit. Step up. So
accountability is a big thing.
Yeah. So I think how do you help?
So what's Lifeline?
You help everyone differently.
What's your experience with Lifeline?
It's been awesome for me.
Tell me some wins you've had on that.
It's been awesome for me.
Like,
it gets you out of thinking about yourself, and you see how I swear away, but how fucking tough a lot of people have it. When you talk about all this mental health and how many people are committing suicide, it's like they've all got good reasons to. It's like it's justified. It's like, man, that's what I think people. One of the things, the misconception about it is it's like, oh, I remember thinking the same, being like, man, if you're going to commit suicide, just leave, just do something. And then you hear these people's trauma, including all of us at some point in their life, where it's like, it's just fuck. They're like, this sucks and this sucks, and and they all go together, right? Like it's also compounded. One of the big reasons why I think the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, or get lucky and unlucky, is because those things happen together. Once you start to be happier, more opportunities come your way. You're more happier. Oh, and then this happens. Oh, and then you've got more opportunity. You're speaking to more people. And the same thing happens the other way. You get divorced, and then you think, I just want to drink. Oh, I lose my job. Now I'm homeless. It's like those things happen together. Fuck. So they exponentially go. That's why I think if you can often just change one or two things, not can you change one or two things? I'm just talking again that I look at this for myself as like, all right, man, get to bed a little earlier. It compounds that shit. So it's like all those things are, what little thing can you change that's going to make it? Sorry, that was a ramble, mate.
But this is the thing. No, it's good. It's good. And that's what I'm sort of saying. Like for me, we need to promote, like what you've said there is these basic things, and they are like I feel if I take my vitamins, I drink my water, I get to bed early, I don't, engage, I don't create antagonism in the world. I let things go that I could get fired up about. And I just try to just let it go, sleep on it for 24 hours or whatever, and just try and keep my space calm. Like you say, it's compounding. I'm happier. I wake up better. I treat my kids better. I'm a better dad. I'm a better businessman. I'm a better everything. Opportunities come my way. I make better decisions. Life is really just decisions, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you think about it, it's just decisions.
Small little habits.
So better decisions make a better life.
Yeah.
So on the flip side, you're dealing with people who are let's not talk about Lifeline though. Let's talk about just people in your space who are struggling.
Yep.
Do you ever have any people that you know on a personal level that you try to give advice to or help to, and it's been a struggle, or have you had any sort of situations like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, all the time. So I feel like that's honestly, as a physio, man, I don't feel like I do that much physio or strength conditioning. Most of it's the mental game. So I think that is, so whether I'm helping these guys as athletes or just your mates, I think that's the majority of what you're doing. You're always just putting in some ideas of, I don't know, what was the main
But you're
question?
still dealing with winners there, right? Because
they don't feel that way
when you're
though,
dealing
man.
with,
They don't.
no?
Yeah, nah. I had one discussion one time where it was just like, oh, we've only got 2 bronze medals. We had two Olympic champions from different countries being like, we'll never get there. We've only got 2 bronze medals and a silver. And it's like, if I can record this, you idiots, everybody. In fact, I think the one truism of elite athletes is what often drives them is, for a lot of them, is just self-deprecating. I'm not good enough. I haven't pushed enough. Oh, they hit 100 winning shots and they're just killing themselves for those 2 bad ones. It's like, man, they can be often some of the most, they're so hard,
wow.
which has an effect, has a benefit. When I talk about trade-offs, it can be really positive. It can have a good outcome on the outside. So, I don't know, man.
It can get a result, but it can be damaging, I guess.
Yeah. I think we all need that, man. We all need that help, whether it's from people in your community or speaking to you. I mean, the amount of times I've had good chats with you, it's like, oh man, you just get off those few people that you can have good, honest conversation with, where you just needed to lift me up. I'm lucky enough. I've got probably too much energy for one person. So that's one gift that I can give to people, right? I've probably got too much of that, but also too, there's trade-offs that are bad for that too. I can over talk or, whatever. So, I'm just working on my shit, and if I can help discover what other people's stuff is going on, and then they can, if they're open enough to work on their own stuff, well, isn't that what we're all trying to bloody get better at? All trying to do. I see these also, mate, just as, again, I hesitate to look at it like I'm helping other people, because whilst that probably might be part of it, it's just the journey that I need help on too. I'm just trying to be better myself. It's like, shit.
So do you have a philosophy or a training style that is different, or are you just the Dan Uden, or do you run a sort of like a way of going about it that's different to, say, the next guy, in the sense that do you try to be a very, caring and empathetic person? Is that your sort of brand?
I think you're probably right. You probably hit a bit on it there, is that what I probably have over other physios is that I genuinely care, and not just it's almost selfish. I know to have a better life. I know for me to have the most meaningful life, I need to be the best version of myself and it being in service of somebody else. Not for them and not for a hashtag thing, it's actually, I'm getting balloons again. It's because I know that I have the best life there, right? So purely from a selfish point of view, that is where I try to be. So I think I'm probably more empathetic because I can actually care a bit more and have the time to, right? I'm only dealing with a few dozen athletes at most. I'm not seeing 20 people a day where it's like, I'm fatigued the whole time. I don't have kids. I'm not running around everywhere. So my focus can be that. I'm not going through fatigued. But my philosophy probably would be, I'm lucky to have those few pillars of a good athlete or out of disease, of the fact that I know the exercise part, I know the body physio part, I'm deeply invested into sort of the growth mindset and positive mindset and the psychology of sports and just how to live a good life. And the nutrition thing, I bluff my way, I try to get. So out of those main pillars, I'm lucky that I've got a few of them that can support athletes.
Do your trainee, or what would you call them, your athletes, do your athletes do you get that feedback that hey, Dan, we were so lucky to have you kind of thing? Is it that they would have had experiences with all different trainers and physios?
Yeah, they haven't fired me yet, but that's probably because they don't understand what I'm saying. So that's coming. I'm sure I'm sure the bluffs.
How do you go with the language barrier?
Oh, mate, terrible. No, I'm lucky. Most of mine speak English, and the times I do tell them what's their common statement, they sort of, Dan, you very shit. Just speak English. And I try to say, that's not how I encourage you. Sometimes so you're doing. So
I think you must be so motivating and fun for them, and you bring that energy because, the emotion that you're in, like when you're up and about, I feel it when I play basketball. I'm driving there. I literally drag myself there. But you're walking on the court, you see your mates, someone throws you a ball, and then you just feel it coming through your body, and you feel it as a sort of, an emotion before you feel it as emotion. You know what I mean? You feel it as a mental feeling, and then it becomes a physical, and it translates. And when you're up and about, So I think when you get there to training and things like that, they must say, oh, Dan's here. It's going to be, they get excited to see you.
Yeah. And you can sort of, it also needs the balance in those times where people are, they're anxious and you're trying to give them confidence, or, you have a big loss and everybody's crying and upset, and your job is to be the stable emotion, so you're often trying to counterbalance whatever's needed at the time. It's like, okay, we're all just walking around like zombies. We need a bit of, come on, let's go. Or, you need some jokes, or you need a bit of that. But then there's other times where things are, okay, everyone's really anxious and you just need to be like, hey, we got this. So I think you're often as support staff, man, we're not the talent, we're the side shoots,
Yeah.
So anything you can do to just support, and I suppose because I care about them, honestly care about them, I'm looking to do as much as I can. If that means getting a cup of coffee, or if it means fixing an ankle, or if that means taking someone and going to, do something, whatever they need, and actually honestly asking about them and being like, hey, what's going on, man? How are you going as a person? You're not just a volleyball player. I actually care about you. And I think that translates. I think that is the big brand that I probably have, is that that they can feel the fact that I'll do whatever we can to fix you. And I actually care about how life is. There's a good mate of ours who used to work for GWS. Good people make good athletes. So you're not working on an athlete, man. You're just trying to make them better as they're trying to be a friend to you. And,
true.
I don't know. I think that's the difference, because I'm not book smart, man. There's heaps of physios who are heaps better than what I am. So I think that's really the only reason I keep getting.
Well, I think you've got now access to all the tech through the podcasts and all that. It's awesome. It's a great time to be alive, man.
Yeah.
Knowledge abounds, so you can hear everyone's opinions, and we've obviously, shot through a few of ours today, but there were people that listened to it and go, oh, that's bullshit. But at least you heard it.
Yeah, exactly.
At least they heard it, and they can think about what we think, and we can hopefully talk to them and think about what they think, and may the best ideas win,
And be curious about, it was one of the guys you had on the podcast a while ago who was saying, there was no growth mindset type things back in the day. All that stuff was always there, but now it's just so accessible. You want to learn about meditation?
Yeah.
You get the best guys in the world. You want to learn about a tendon problem? I'm not trying to find the best person in Australia or even my region. I can go to the tendon specialist out of, UK. I mean, Australia's is pretty good anyway, but whatever. You can find.
You got access.
You got access to
it's amazing.
all this information. So, and you don't have to read it.
I think it'd be great when we can start using, I really think that's the stuff that, we have the tools to solve the world's problems. When I was in the 80s and 90s growing up, late 80s, let's say, I remember when what was it like? I can't remember I think when the Berlin Wall came down or something, I remember just thinking like, this is it. Like, there's going to be no more wars, there's going to be no more hunger. The world's solved,
Yeah.
And then gradually you find out about some country starving. You're like, what's going on over there? Oh, there's, and then World Vision, and, you start realizing there's starving children, and suddenly what? We haven't solved all this? Like, because we lived in our little box, and it can be overwhelming, but I do think we've got the technology to solve these, these world problems. But, man, it's been a great chat, eh? Do you enjoy having a
Mate,
chin
I always
wag?
love chatting to you. I think the biggest problem with you and me chatting is that half the day can go, well, we're just on to the next topic.
We don't really stick to a subject, but that's been great, man. I want you to come back to Australia. What are your plans to come back home?
I don't know. I've at the moment I'm sort of in the phase of just making this a lot more short term. So just doing sort of part time and a little bit of consulting stuff. That's really the plan. But I don't really have, that's probably my next avenue of where to go. I'm just in that process of, okay, where can I be of most value? I know I can do good value here. And when we talk about that same thing that I sort of said before, where am I the most amount of value but I miss a lot of stuff back there. So the answer is I don't know. I'm planning
awesome.
next year I'll be there certainly a lot more, mate. I'll be here a lot less. So that's the plan. And then
great, man. Well, it's been awesome, mate, man. I love chatting to you.
I love your guts. It's always great seeing you, man. And I appreciate everything you've done for me. I love the podcast that you're doing, but it's just, often you don't realise those influences you have early on when we, first met years ago, and those small little influences, they're the blessings in life if you want to be religious, or they're the bits of privilege that you're just like. And when you have those influences at the right time,
very lucky to have them. Yeah,
that's special, man. That's the stuff that I think I'm very grateful for. And you often don't know.
Well, I think it's also what you were saying before about how these things sort of happen together. I mean, you find yourself doing something good, and it changes your life a little bit. Then you find yourself in a situation that does something good, then you find yourself in a different place, and then you find yourself basically in a different world, really. Like, and I think if we go back to when we first sort of our lives kind of came together, you know, I had a very eclectic group of friends, and you realize that you were just kind of pulling like these, this guy out of those 10 blokes in that group, me and him connected, me and you, and you're right. And now here we find ourselves, you know, 20 years later, and you know, just still connected and still inspiring each other. It's great. Yeah. It's really awesome.
Well, you've inspired me. I'm going to go and be a comedian next, mate. It sounds like that was the avenue to having a good life. I'm going to go do some studying.
So. Good sense of humour.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, nice to have you, man. Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
You too, man. Really great to have you. Keep doing the awesome stuff that you're doing, mate. The world needs it, and I know I do too. So thank you.
All right. See you, mate.